Good morning, I'm Vicki Gordon, and I firstly would like to acknowledge the country that we're on and the elders past and present. My background is as a nurse. I've lived and worked in remote Indigenous communities for 18 years and currently working in public health advocacy and education of practitioners new to remote. So although my accent might indicate otherwise, I've actually lived in the Territory for nearly 30 years, and I'm really passionate about the environment and social justice. I'd just like to say up front that I strongly feel that there should be a ban in place on unconventional fracking, and the focus needs to be on renewables in these times, as Germany, Spain, China and Brazil are doing now. I read with interest the initial part of your report regarding Rachel Carson's Silent Spring from 1962. It's actually even more relevant now as we're confronted with many issues. One related to what that particular topic was recently around bees, and Bunnings were pulling their Yates Confidor because of the effect on the bees' immune system and disorientation. Other major issues are deforestation and feral cats. I feel like there's almost the nation is. It's like we can't pillage fast enough, and I feel like the state of the economy can be seen as a reason for doing this. In these climate change times, it was interesting to read the Australian Institute of Climate and Energy state that if shale gas was fully exploited in the NT, it would be the equivalent of 130 new coal power plants over 40 years. Reading the report, there's some great recommendations, and it was good to hear you say about that many of them are already include the exploration phase and some don't, but probably need to. So the SREBA, the regulations, code of practice, mitigation of risk, monitoring, compliance, but I have a kind of severe lack of trust in that there's not the care, the will or the capacity to undertake this. The risks seem so great, and with so much of the NT under exploration, it concerns me greatly. The recommendations that I felt were really good were 7.11, talking about the enclosed tanks for wastewater, 8.7 and 11 regarding the rehabilitation post-operation, 8.11 regarding the burial of pipelines, 9.4 regarding methane monitoring funded by the industry, 14.4 the no-go zones never available for exploration, 14.7 the regulatory framework enforceable codes of practice, 14.12 the environment and rehabilitation bonds, 14.11 the company's environmental and compliance history be taken into account, not only in Australia but overseas. 14.29, referral of the onus of proof with regard to environmental harm. 14.25, in relation to whistleblowers and the hotline. 14.30, increasing fines for non-compliance. 14.1, full cost recovery system fees the gas industry to pay to cover the regulation costs. And finally, the separation, 14.31, separating the regulators and promoters. I saw with interest the other day around the Amungi well defamation, and there seemed to be some discrepancy there about reports in relation to that. I recently read an article in the Guardian Weekly by Matthew Taylor talking about the links between the shale gas boom and the plastics crisis that cannot be ignored. We have an awful legacy here in the Territory, I believe, in the form of MacArthur River. We're fined $700 for smoke pollution, Mount Todd tailing dams overflowing, rum jungle, uranium leakage, and abandoned unrehabilitated mine sites scattered throughout, including Tennant Creek area, and those sited flying into Darwin. In relation to water, we live in a largely arid, semi-arid, especially in Central Australia area, and the sheer volumes of water required for this activity I feel like there's a real risk of depletion and contamination, and those risks are too great. Some communities are already struggling with supply. An estimated 20,000 fracking wells need 400 billion litres of water. So what has to happen to that colossal amount of contaminated water? As it said in recommendation 7.16, it's not to go into drainage lines, waterways, temporary stream systems or water holes. Other concerns I have are in relation to the chemicals used, exposure to a lot of these areas, it's in remote areas, the exposure to these chemicals, what happens to the solid waste, the industrialisation of the landscape. I kind of feel like the wonder about the effect on wildlife, because I strongly believe that we should be sharing this planet with other species. As the first speaker this morning has said, concern about the greenhouse gas emissions. I read that it can be up to the effect of 50 trucks a day for one well. I just think about the state of the roads already in some places and the effect on communities and wildlife, the transportation of chemicals and motor vehicle accidents. With regards to employment, renewables also can create employment, and this industry and other mining industries have also been affected by the boom and bust. The benefits can be short-term and flow outside, while the costs on all sorts of levels could be borne by the NT. The health effects are of concern too, and there have been a lot of peer-reviewed studies linking fracking and exposure to public health and environmental risks. I feel like there's, as the first speaker said, about people in the community relying on the media for information. I feel like there's a reliance maybe on people being distracted or busy, and some of the things that have actually been said by people in the media is an insult to people's intelligence. I have concern about the corporate tax that's not being paid some of these big companies, and in view of the number of places within the NT that are stating their opposition to it, I don't feel there's a social licence to do so. People need to be listened to. There's a growing number of places where a ban or a moratorium is in place. France, Germany, Scotland, and 2 provinces in Canada and 3 states in the US, as in the final report, but there's also Argentina, Wales, Ireland, Luxembourg, the Czech Republic, Romania, Bulgaria, Spain and Victoria, and here in Australia. And in the NT we have had Adelaide River, Wagate Beach, Katherine, and more recently the Alice Springs Town Council speak out against it. I was involved in a door knock in Old East Side here in Alice Springs, where 89% of people, households were against it. There's currently a petition happening as well in another part of town, and that's got several hundred signatures on it already. I remember well the pastoralists in the lead up to the election having a full page in the NT News stating their opposition to this industry. The Northern Territory Public Health Association, I believe Rosalie Schultz spoke yesterday from there, and the Catholic Social Justice Awareness Group have spoken out as well. I feel like the energy industry in this country has been just disgraceful in regard to the lack of consideration of domestic consumption, and thus because it's being exported, and so it's been used to put pressure on the Northern Territory and Victoria. And for our Prime Minister to come out and say, pull the trigger, I dislike immensely. In relation to Indigenous people, I was at the Elliott gathering in late September, early October, and there was a young woman and an older man who were just crying because they're so worried for their country. And the feeling of helplessness at times was just palpable. Not only in this area but in other areas too in relation to Indigenous people, there's not enough proper information given in a way that with the use of interpreters, considering worldview on very complex issues, there's not enough paid to that area. There's also the link between stress and anxiety and increasing chronic disease, of which we have a huge amount happening here in the Territory and Indigenous population. So finally, I just want to say that again, I believe there should be a ban in place, and we should be focusing on renewables, as there are many benefits of that, not just for the environment, but also in relation to jobs and businesses. We need to do this for future generations. I've already heard it said, as the two other speakers, in relation to young people, the legacy we will be leaving behind us when we're all gone. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gordon, for your presentation, considered and detailed. Just one thing I just wanted to clarify. I think you mentioned the discrepancy around reports concerning the deformation with respect to a Mungie well. What did you mean by that?
I saw a presentation. I'm not sure who it was by, because I only come in part way through. What seemed like some information was left out in one report, and in another one there was some confusion about actually what happened with the Amungi well in relation to that deformation.
Okay. I would urge you, all I'll say is I'd urge you to go and have a look at the recording, which is on our website for that particular day in Darwin. It was day 2 in Darwin. There was a presentation by Ms. Hogan on behalf of Lock the Gate. She suggested some type of potential cover-up by Origin in relation to the existence of 2 diagrams, one which had some information on it, one which didn't. Yeah. Subsequently, the inquiry and a statement by Dr. David Close of Origin cleared that up, and indeed there certainly was no cover-up whatsoever by Origin, which the inquiry accepts. The information had been in the public domain since the 25th of December last year for all the world to see. The information was provided for different purposes to the inquiry, and that's reflected in the reports. And Ms. Hogan was invited to clarify or retract her comments. Sorry, if I said 25 December, I meant 25 May, 25 May 2017. So it's been the existence of the 2 diagrams in question has been in the public domain since the 25th of May 2017. So it's not some new discovery by anyone. As I said, and there was a subsequent clarification by Dr. Close by the inquiry, and then a further comment by Ms. Hogan later on that day.
Okay, thanks for that. Like I said, I only come in part way through, and I guess it's part of the vagaries of social media at times. Yeah. Thanks for that. I'll look that up.
Just don't believe everything you read in social media is the bottom line on that one.
That's right.
Yes, quite. Any questions at all? No. I wouldn't mind just taking you back to, I think you said you've attended some meetings in Elliot. Is that right?
Yeah, there was a gathering in Elliot. I can't remember if it was late September, early October on Beetaloo Station, and then there was a march in the township of Elliot itself. Okay. So it was sort of over a weekend, people gathering around fracking, and it was pretty moving really to be present, because it was a majority of Indigenous people there from that area, and just a handful of non-Indigenous people. I happened to be in tenant at the time, so I went along to it. Okay. Yeah.
Certainly, the community meetings that we have held in Elliot and Gilglinkin, which we previously held and which we'll hold again next week, certainly the people who have attended those meetings have spoken out, and largely Aboriginal people have spoken out against fracking, and they've spoken out and presented all sorts of very cogent, powerful reasons why they don't want this. And the panel has taken note of that and will continue to take note of that.
Okay, thank you.
Again, thank you very much for your presentation.
Excuse my nervousness.
No, it was a flawless performance.